A blind baby elephant raised by a canine German shepherd. What happens next will shock you. When a wildlife rescue center in Kenya received an emergency call about an abandoned baby elephant found wandering blind and helpless near a dried-up riverbed, no one expected what would happen next. The calf was barely clinging to life, confused, vulnerable, and entirely dependent on human intervention. But as fate would have it, help would come from the most unexpected place. Not from another elephant, not even from a human caregiver, but from a retired canine German shepherd named Thor. What started as a routine wildlife rescue would soon turn into one of the most heartwarming and shocking stories of interspecies friendship the world had ever seen. Thor, once trained for police operations, had experienced his share of danger and loyalty tests. But nothing could have prepared him, or the rescue team, for the bond he was about to form with this blind and scared little elephant. What happens between them will defy everything you thought you knew about animal instincts, loyalty, and the power of love to transcend species boundaries. Before we dive into this emotional and unforgettable journey, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications. That way, you won't miss any of our future stories about resilience, love, and the incredible connections that change lives forever. Now, let's begin. The late afternoon sun cast long golden shadows across the savannah. The air was thick with dust as the dry season lingered longer than usual in this part of Kenya. Rangers from the local wildlife rescue unit had just wrapped up their daily patrol when the radio crackled with urgency. A nearby farmer had spotted something strange near the banks of the dried-up Tana River. From a distance, it looked like a large gray rock moving aimlessly back and forth. But as the farmer approached, he realized it was no rock. It was a baby elephant, alone, disoriented. When the rescue team arrived minutes later, they were met with a heartbreaking scene. The calf, no more than a few months old, stood trembling on unsteady legs. Its tiny trunk swung erratically in the air, bumping into branches and rocks as it tried to make sense of its surroundings. Its eyes, a milky pale color, confirmed their worst fear. The baby was completely blind. Ahmed, the team leader, and a seasoned wildlife ranger with over 20 years of experience, knelt beside the calf. His heart tightened in his chest. "How long has she been like this?" he murmured, running his hand gently along the calf's dusty back. Judging by her sunken cheeks and the way her ribs showed through her skin, she had been without her mother for days. Without urgent care, she wouldn't survive the night. The team quickly loaded her into their rescue truck, wrapping her in wet blankets to cool her down and giving her small sips of rehydration fluid. As they drove back toward the sanctuary, Ahmed's mind raced. They had rescued orphaned elephants before, but never one that was blind. Raising a sightless elephant calf would require more than just food and shelter. It would need constant guidance, affection, and companionship to have even the slightest chance at survival. That night, As the team settled her into a makeshift enclosure at the sanctuary, Thor lay watching from a distance. Thor wasn't just any dog. He was a retired canine German shepherd who had spent most of his life alongside Ahmed, working in search and rescue missions, anti-poaching operations, and even disaster relief missions across Africa. At 9 years old, Thor was strong, but wise, experienced, but gentle. Since retirement, Thor had become the unofficial emotional support animal of the sanctuary. He comforted injured cheetahs, orphaned zebras, and even a traumatized lion cub once. But elephants, that was new territory. The next morning, the little elephant stood pressed against the corner of her enclosure, too frightened to explore. Her ears flapped nervously, her trunk barely lifted off the ground. She refused to eat. Ahmed watched with growing concern. The calf's energy was fading faster than expected. They needed to act quickly. That's when Thor made his move. Without command or hesitation, the German shepherd trotted toward the gate of the enclosure. Ahmed opened it slowly, unsure of what Thor intended to do. Thor approached the calf carefully, lowering his body to the ground in a submissive, non-threatening posture. Then, with slow, deliberate steps, he walked up and gently nuzzled the calf's trunk with his muzzle. The baby elephant flinched at first, but when she felt the soft warmth of Thor's breath and the gentle pressure of his touch, she froze, then slowly lifted her trunk to feel him. For the first time in days, the calf stopped trembling. Ahmed's eyes widened. The entire rescue team stood in silence, watching this unexpected connection unfold right before them. Thor let out a low, reassuring whine and lay beside her, resting his head on her front leg. That night, under the African stars, something incredible happened. The baby elephant finally ate, as long as Thor stayed by her side. And that was just the beginning. The following days at the sanctuary felt like witnessing a small miracle unfold. Every morning, Ahmed and the team would find Thor curled protectively beside the baby elephant, whom they had named Nia, a Swahili word meaning purpose. Thor's presence seemed to ground her. When she stumbled, he would position himself beside her, offering his sturdy body as a guide. When she became overwhelmed by new sounds or smells, Thor would gently nudge her or lick her trunk to calm her down. It was as if the German shepherd instinctively understood the unique challenges Nia faced. Ahmed couldn't believe what he was seeing. "I've worked with elephants for 2 decades, he said to the other rangers one evening, "but I've never seen one bond like this with a dog, especially not a blind calf." The team began to adapt their care routine around Thor. During feeding time, Thor would walk with Nia to the feeding station, his tail wagging slowly, his steps patient. She followed the sound of his paws on the dry dirt. When it was time for her bottle feedings, Thor would sit nearby, keeping watch as if guarding her from invisible threats. But the real test came one afternoon when Nia was encouraged to take her first steps outside the enclosure. Ahmed had carefully selected a small, safe area of open land near the sanctuary, a place free of rocks, sharp branches, or sudden drops. Still, no one was sure how Nia would handle the unfamiliar space. As the gate swung open, Nia hesitated. Her large ears fanned out, trying to process the wave of new sounds, the chirping of birds, the distant rustle of antelope, and the gentle whistle of the wind. Thor took a few steps forward, turning back to glance at her, as if saying, "It's okay, I'm here." Slowly, cautiously, Nia lifted one foot, then another. With Thor walking inches ahead, she began to follow, trusting him completely. The rangers held their breath as Nia navigated the open field for the first time. At one point, she veered too far to the left, heading straight toward a low thorn bush. Thor immediately stopped, turned, and barked softly, just once. The sound startled Nia, making her pause. Thor trotted over and gently bumped her shoulder with his body, steering her back toward the clear path. Ahmed's eyes filled with emotion. "Look at them," he whispered. "He's not just guiding her physically. He's giving her courage." For the next hour, Nia explored the field under Thor's close supervision. She used her trunk to explore the ground, swaying it from side to side like a cane. Thor stayed by her side the entire time, keeping her on track with soft nudges and occasional playful barks. Their bond grew stronger with each passing day. Thor became her eyes, her protector, and, in many ways, her family. But not everyone at the sanctuary believed this arrangement was sustainable. During a staff meeting later that week, Miriam, the head veterinarian, raised her concerns. "This is heartwarming, yes," she said, flipping through a folder of observation reports. "But we have to think long-term. Nia will grow quickly. Within months, she'll weigh several hundred pounds. What happens when she accidentally steps on Thor, or when she starts displaying unpredictable behavior? Elephants are wild animals. This isn't like raising a dog and a cat together." Ahmed understood her concerns, but he also knew what he was witnessing wasn't ordinary. "I get it," he replied. "But right now, Thor is the only reason she's alive. She eats because he's there. She moves because he leads her. Without him, we'd already be planning a burial, not a release plan." The room fell silent. Ahmed added, "We'll monitor them closely. If things change, we'll adjust. But for now, we let them be together." That night, Ahmed sat by the enclosure, watching the two friends sleep side by side. The moon cast a silver glow over the sanctuary, illuminating the outline of a small, fragile elephant resting her head against the strong, loyal body of a retired K-9 hero. Neither of them knew it yet, but life was about to throw them both into a situation far more dangerous and challenging than anything they had faced so far. And when it came, their bond would be tested in ways no one could have predicted. The days that followed felt like a calm after the storm. Nia was making slow but steady progress. She had learned to walk short distances around the sanctuary, guided carefully by Thor. The other animals at the rescue center, from baboons to injured antelopes, seemed to instinctively give the duo space. It was as if everyone understood that something special was happening between the blind elephant and the retired K9. But that fragile peace was about to be shattered. It started with a shift in the air. Dark clouds gathered over the horizon, heavy with the promise of rain. For most people living in this part of Kenya, rain was a blessing after months of drought. But for those at the sanctuary, this storm felt different. Ahmed stood at the edge of the compound, his eyes scanning the sky. "This is no ordinary storm," he muttered. "It's coming in fast, too fast." By late afternoon, the wind picked up. Loose debris swirled through the air, and the distant rumble of thunder grew louder by the minute. Miriam ran toward Ahmed, holding a weather radio. "We've got a level 3 storm warning. The Tana River might flood. We need to move the animals to higher ground. Now!" Panic set in. The sanctuary wasn't built for this level of emergency. The enclosures, while sturdy, weren't designed to withstand flash floods. The team sprang into action. They started loading the smaller animals into transport cages and moving them uphill to a safer location. The larger animals, like zebras and wildebeests, were herded toward a rocky ridge that offered some elevation. But when it came to Nia, things got complicated. Moving a blind, frightened elephant calf during a storm was risky enough. Doing it with limited manpower and time made it almost impossible. Ahmed rushed to her enclosure. Nia stood trembling, her ears pinned back, trunk swinging wildly in confusion as the air filled with the scent of wet earth and ozone. And Thor was already there, standing between her and the fence, barking loudly every time the thunder cracked. Ahmed called out, "Thor, here, boy!" But Thor ignored him, focusing entirely on Nia. Realizing they had no choice, Ahmed and 2 other rangers quickly opened the gate and grabbed ropes, attempting to gently guide Nia out. She resisted, rearing back and letting out a high-pitched, terrified trumpet. Rain began to pour in sheets, drenching everyone within seconds. Thor sprang into action. He ran ahead a few meters toward the higher ground, then turned and barked repeatedly at Nia, urging her to follow. Through the chaos, Nia hesitated, but then, step by trembling step, she began to move in Thor's direction. The path to safety wasn't easy. The ground quickly turned to mud, slippery and treacherous. The rangers struggled to keep their footing as they guided Nia up the incline. Thor darted back and forth, positioning himself near her legs whenever she faltered. At one critical moment, Nia stumbled, collapsing sideways into a shallow ditch. Her blind eyes widened in panic as she struggled to rise. her legs flailing helplessly in the thick, sticky mud. Ahmed's heart sank. Time was running out. The roar of the river below told him the floodwaters were close. Thor didn't hesitate. Ignoring the rain, the mud, and the danger, Thor leapt into the ditch beside her. He pressed his body against her side, barking and growling at her, not in anger, but with a desperate, commanding urgency. Nia, feeling his weight and hearing his voice, gathered what little strength she had left and pushed herself up with a strained, trembling effort. The rangers pulled on the ropes, and with Thor guiding from the side, Nia finally climbed out of the ditch and onto firmer ground. Together, they climbed higher until they reached the safety of the ridge where the other animals were gathered. The sanctuary below was now almost entirely under water. Buildings, fences, and equipment were submerged or floating away. As Ahmed looked around at the devastation below, he knew they had lost so much. But they hadn't lost Nia, and they hadn't lost Thor. Soaked to the bone, covered in mud, and shaking from exhaustion, Thor sat beside Nia at the edge of the ridge, keeping watch over her like the loyal guardian he had become. But deep down, Ahmed knew this was only the beginning. The flood had destroyed their sanctuary. Now, they would face the challenge of survival in a world with no walls, no fences, and new dangers lurking everywhere. The morning after the storm revealed the full extent of the disaster. The sanctuary, once a safe haven for injured and orphaned wildlife, was now a broken landscape of debris and mud. Fallen trees blocked the old dirt road leading to the nearest village, and the main enclosure fences lay twisted like wire sculptures, useless against the rising river water still cutting through the land. Ahmed stood on the ridge, staring at what remained of the place he had spent years building. His heart ached at the sight of it. Beside him, Thor sat close to Nia, both of them equally exhausted but alive. Nia's flapping ears twitched at every unfamiliar sound. Her blind eyes looked into nothingness, yet she pressed herself protectively against Thor, as if trusting that wherever he was, she would be safe. "We can't stay here," Ahmed finally said, turning to his team. "The river's going to keep rising for days. We need to move the animals out. Now." Miriam stepped forward, wiping tears and rainwater from her face. "And where do you suggest we go? Every road is flooded. We're cut off." Ahmed clenched his jaw. "We go through the forest. It's risky, but it's our only option." The forest stretched for nearly 15 miles before opening up to higher ground and, hopefully, safety. But it was dense, unpredictable terrain, home to predators and treacherous ground. For most of the larger animals, the team could herd them in small groups. But for Nia, it wouldn't be that simple. Blind and frightened, she couldn't follow the group like the others. Moving through unknown territory was going to push her to her limits. As the team gathered what little supplies they could salvage, medical kits, ropes, and emergency rations, Ahmed approached Thor. "You're up for one more mission, old boy?" he whispered, scratching behind Thor's ears. The German shepherd's tail gave a weak wag in response. Thor stood, shaking mud from his fur, and went straight to Nia's side. With the group ready, they began their slow journey into the forest. The first few hundred yards went better than expected. Nia followed Thor's scent trail, her trunk occasionally reaching out to brush against his back or side for reassurance. But as the forest grew denser, challenges started piling up. Low-hanging branches smacked into Nia's face and ears, startling her. Sharp roots snaked across the ground, making her stumble more than once. Every time she tripped or froze in fear, Thor would double back, nuzzling her gently or barking softly to encourage her forward. At one point, Nia refused to move at all. She stood rigid, trumpeting loudly in distress as a group of baboons chattered high in the trees above, spooking her with their sudden calls. The other animals and rangers had already advanced ahead, leaving Ahmed, Thor, and Nia temporarily behind. Ahmed knelt beside her, speaking softly. "You can do this, Nia. You've come this far. Don't give up on me now." Thor seemed to understand the urgency. He lay down right in front of her feet, staring up into her blank eyes, then gave her a playful, encouraging bark. Nia's ears twitched at the familiar sound. Slowly, she lifted her foot, feeling the ground with care, and took another shaky step forward. The forest grew darker as thick clouds rolled in overhead, dimming the little light that filtered through the tree canopy. Suddenly, Thor froze. His hackles rose. A low, guttural growl rumbled from his throat. Ahmed's instincts kicked in immediately. He scanned the shadows ahead and spotted movement. Just a flicker, but enough to make his heart race. A lone hyena, separated from its pack, stood about 20 yards ahead, crouching low in the brush, eyes fixed on Nia. Thor positioned himself between Nia and the threat, baring his teeth. Ahmed grabbed a long branch, holding it like a staff. "Back off," he shouted, stepping forward. The hyena hesitated, sizing them up. It was clear the animal was hungry, desperate, but also smart enough to recognize a fight it might not win. With one final snarl, the hyena turned and slinked back into the undergrowth. Ahmed exhaled sharply, adrenaline surging through his veins. Thor stayed alert for several minutes after, pacing between Nia and the trees until he was sure the danger had passed. As the group pressed on deeper into the forest, Ahmed realized something that made his throat tighten with emotion. They weren't just trying to survive a flood anymore. They were fighting for each other every step of the way, and this journey was far from over. By the time the group reached the halfway point through the forest, exhaustion weighed on everyone like a heavy blanket. The sun had barely risen, but the humidity pressed down hard, making each breath feel thick and heavy. For the other rescued animals, zebras, antelopes, and a few smaller mammals, the journey remained difficult but manageable. The rangers did their best to herd them carefully through the tangled undergrowth, but for Nia, the struggle was becoming unbearable. Her small legs trembled with every step. Her trunk dragged along the ground more than it lifted. The uneven terrain had taken its toll on her soft, underdeveloped feet. Blisters and scrapes lined her skin from constant falls. Even Thor, always strong and determined, was showing signs of fatigue. His breathing had grown shallow. Mud clung to his legs. Yet, every time Nia stumbled, Thor was there, nudging her, barking softly, circling her legs to encourage her forward. Ahmed watched helplessly. He had been part of countless rescue missions, but this was different. The emotional bond between Thor and Nia made this more than just a survival trek. It felt personal. As they reached a particularly steep incline, Nia froze. Her front legs buckled, and she collapsed onto her side, her blind eyes wide with fear and pain. She let out a long, mournful trumpet that echoed through the forest like a cry for help. The other rangers stopped. The group behind them paused, turning to see what had happened. Ahmed ran to her side. "Nia, come on, girl. Stay with me," he whispered, wiping dirt and sweat from her face. Thor stood over her, whining, pawing gently at her shoulder. Miriam rushed over with the medical kit. "She's dehydrated and overheated. Her heart rate's up. We need to cool her down now or she won't make it another mile." Ahmed's mind raced. They were still hours away from the safe plateau. The emergency water supply was nearly gone, rationed for both humans and animals. One of the rangers pointed to the map. "There's a small watering hole about a mile east, if the storm didn't destroy it." "That's too far," Miriam argued. "In her condition, she can't make it." Silence fell over the group. The options were running out. That's when Thor did something no one expected. Without hesitation, he took off running in the direction of the watering hole. His paws kicked up dirt and leaves as he disappeared into the thick trees. "Thor!" Ahmed shouted after him. But the dog was gone. Minutes passed, then 10, then 20. The tension grew unbearable. Ahmed knelt beside Nia, holding her trunk close to his chest, whispering words of comfort. Just as doubt started to creep in, the sound of rapid footsteps broke through the forest stillness. Thor emerged, panting heavily, his fur soaked with mud and water. But he wasn't alone. Trailing behind him was a muddy trickle of water, a small, narrow stream that seemed to have formed after the storm, cutting a shallow path through the woods. Thor had found it, then dug furiously at the bank, deep enough to loosen the soil and divert the water toward them. Ahmed's eyes widened. "You clever boy." The rangers quickly dug the trench wider with their hands and tools, channeling more water toward Nia's location. Miriam rushed to soak cloths and towels. placing them over Nia's body to cool her down. Another ranger filled a container and began pouring water gently over her head and back. Within minutes, Nia's breathing began to steady. Her ears twitched faintly. Thor lay beside her, too tired to stand, but refusing to close his eyes. His body shook with every breath, but he stayed alert, watching her, guarding her. As Nia lifted her head weakly and reached her trunk toward him, the entire team burst into cheers and relieved laughter. Ahmed wiped tears from his eyes. "You just saved her life again, Thor." But as they all celebrated this small victory, Ahmed's gaze drifted toward the dark clouds still looming in the distance. More rain was coming, and with it, new dangers they hadn't yet imagined. The fight for survival was far from over. Night fell fast and thick over the forest, turning everything to shadows. The air cooled, but the threat level rose. The team built a small fire on the ridge where they stopped for the night, but its glow did little to push back the overwhelming darkness. Thor stayed awake, sitting upright beside Nia, ears pointed and alert. Every snap of a twig made him growl low in his throat. Ahmed barely slept. Around midnight, a chorus of howls echoed from somewhere deep in the forest. Jackals, possibly hyenas too. The scent of vulnerable animals, especially a weak, blind calf, would attract them. Suddenly, Thor jumped to his feet, barking with force. Out of the dark, glowing eyes appeared. 3, maybe 4 predators, circling at a distance. The rangers grabbed torches and shouted, swinging sticks and flashing lights to scare them off. Thor lunged forward, barking with every ounce of strength left in him, positioning himself between the predators and Nia. The jackals hesitated, then finally retreated, disappearing back into the trees. Thor didn't sit down until the last pair of eyes vanished. Ahmed knelt beside him, rubbing his neck. "You're more than just a dog," he whispered. "You're her guardian angel." That night, with danger still lurking, Thor stayed awake until dawn. By sunrise, the team pushed forward, exhaustion heavy in every step. The plateau was still 2 miles away. Nia struggled, but Thor continued guiding her. When she stumbled, he barked. When she froze, he nudged her forward. Midway, Ahmed noticed Thor limping. His paw pads were raw, torn from the rocky terrain. But Thor didn't stop. At noon, they crested the final hill. Below them lay the rescue site, high ground, safe, with emergency tents already set up by a backup team. As Nia stepped onto the flat land, the rangers erupted in applause and cheers. Miriam rushed to check her vitals, confirming she was stable but still weak. Thor finally collapsed onto the grass, panting but alive, his eyes never leaving Nia. Ahmed knelt beside him, tears in his eyes. "You did it, boy. You saved her." The bond between a blind elephant and an aging canine had defied nature, logic, and survival odds. In that moment, everyone realized They hadn't just saved an elephant. They had witnessed something unforgettable, the true meaning of loyalty, courage, and love between two unlikely friends.